The earth is our historian. It is made of our ancestors' bones. It provides us with nourishment, medicine, and comfort. It is a source of our independence. It is our mother. We do not dominate her, we harmonize with her. For centuries, Native Americans traveled with the changing seasons, living in a cycle of harmony with nature. Settlement brought agriculture and the notion of ownership, not sharing, but subduing, not cooperation, extraction. Agriculture thrived at nature's expense. Now that we have gotten back our lands, we can restore that harmony by managing our lands wisely. In pre-European time, the people of the lands now known as the Flathead Indian Reservation got from the land the things we needed to sustain life. We knew fire was an important tool that helped maintain nature's balance. We used cool seasonal burns that cleaned forest litter and added nutrients to the soil so diverse and valuable plants could grow. These provided food and cover for animals. Burning also improved grazing, cleaned campsites, and cleared trails. Indians made war and communicated with fire. July 20th, 1805. We saw smoke arise as if the country had been set on fire up the valley. We were at a loss to determine whether it had been set on fire by the natives as a signal among themselves, as is their custom. And John Mullen wrote, "We found the valley had been burnt over recently, showing that the Indians had preceded us, and the young green grass is growing abundantly." Indian influence on our forests waned when the Hellgate Treaty of 1855 created the reservation. The United States wanted Indians to pursue a non-migratory agricultural lifestyle. The Salish, the Kootenai, the Pend Oreille, along with some Kalispel and Spokanes on the Flathead Indian Reservation, were now declared farmers. The forest interfered with cultivation. Trees were viewed as having no agricultural value. Fire was no longer used to renew forests, but to clear them for planting. Indians opposed this settled way of life and loss of control over traditional lands and values, but their opposition to farming, mining, grazing, and timber harvesting, and the building of the railroad fell on deaf ears. The imminent opening of the reservation would bring logging, technology, and more change. Northern Pacific Railroad magnates did recognize Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes as timber owners. In 1884, needing lumber to build their railroad, they paid $2 per 1,000 board feet measure for about 2.7 million board feet of timber. The payment of $5,458 became the first reservation timber sale and resulted in a per capita payment to 1,510 enrolled tribal members, $3.61 each. The United States Attorney General didn't agree that the tribes had timber rights. He ruled in 1888 and again in 1889 that Indians could only cut timber from lands held in trust for agricultural clearing or improvements. More change was on its way. A severe March windstorm in 1906 resulted in a blowdown of about 18 million board feet of mature and over-mature ponderosa pine throughout the reservation. This calamity forced the Indian and Forest Services to work together to make rules for disposing of damaged timber on Indian lands. Such cooperation was short-lived. In 1909, sole authority for timber operations on Indian lands passed to the Department of Interior's Indian Service. The Homestead Act of 1910 marked the opening of the reservation to white settlement. Also by act of Congress, timber could now be legally cut for sale. Fire, absent for 30 years from forests except for agricultural clearing, also revisited in one of the worst wildfire years ever recorded in this area. Most of the forest on the reservation today owes its existence to fire. From 1659 to 1915, fire frequencies in western Montana in low-elevation ponderosa pine and Douglas fir averaged 9-year intervals. Fire is responsible for the widespread occurrence and even existence of western larch, lodgepole pine, western white pine, and ponderosa pine. Fires are classified as surface fires, ground fires, and crown fires. Low-intensity surface fires usually burn dry grasses, small plants, and very young seedlings. Ground fires burn more slowly at higher temperatures, consuming heavier forest litter. These fires will scar mature trees, with mortality in those species less resistant to fire effects. Most resistant in this area are ponderosa pine and western larch, with Douglas fir, lodgepole pine, true firs, and spruce less so. Intense crown fires will replace entire stands of trees, especially dense stands of similar age, size, and height. Seen in a scale of centuries, fire is crucial to forest evolution. Without fire, stands of trees are weaker, smaller in diameter, and more susceptible to attack by insects and disease. 2, a marked buildup of forest fuels occurs, increasing the likelihood of a catastrophic fire at a later time. Reservation policy since the late 1800s has been to extinguish all naturally occurring fires. Modern fire specialists think this is a mistake. By regulating prescribed burns and the intensity and pattern of logging, today's forester can greatly influence the forest's health and composition. The 1910 fires resulted in much damaged timber, depressed lumber prices, and few major timber sales from 1912 to 1917. One large sale occurred when the Flathead Agency moved from the Jocko to the Dixon site. The lumber market revived in 1917 with U.S. involvement in World War I. Between 1917 and 1928, Ronan logging units hauled out 108 million board feet of timber, mostly mature ponderosa pine, at about $4 per thousand board feet. Agriculture demanded room too. In a practice called clean cutting, every tree of commercial value was cut to expand cultivation. Broadcast burns, large fires that created smoke up and down the valley, disposed of slash from timber cuts. With technological advances, railroad logging and log chutes gave way to gas-powered tractors and trucks. The advent of new scaling procedures, bonding requirements, and slash disposal rules meant logging was now big business. Forests were regaining their value, a fact not lost on the tribes. In the 30s, the concept of self-determination was starting to attract support among the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes, who up to this time did not play any major role in resource management. The Wheeler-Howard Act, or Indian Reorganization Act of 1934, brought about a new awareness of Indian land ownership, allowing tribes to organize, charter, and lease land. With logging now a business enterprise, the Indian Service wanted to ensure an adequate timber supply for future needs. As a result, federal policy on Indian forests moved toward sustained yield management. Sustained yield principles required Indian Service foresters to manage the forest for continuous production, thus ensuring an eventual balance between growth and harvest. The first Flathead Indian Forest Management Plan of 1945 reflected these new concepts in forest management. Annual allowable cut refers to the amount of sustainable timber yield attributed to growth. Continuous forest inventory. This term means periodic remeasurement of fixed plots to determine forest health and growth. It is one way to calculate the annual allowable cut. Selective cutting, targeting individual trees for cut or leave based on rating systems. Silviculture is the practice of controlling forest establishment, composition, and growth to meet landowners' objectives. This plan created new concerns for the Flathead foresters. One was the uncertainty of maintaining a timber program. The tribes had already begun aggressively purchasing land, partly to address this uncertainty. We had purchased 48 allotments comprising over 98,000 acres. And in an effort to resolve conflicts over timber ownership, consolidate tribal timber lands, and increase efficient forest management, the Tribal Council approved $300,000 for land acquisition in 1953. Buying land remains a high priority today. Maintenance of a timber program also played a part in the defeat of termination. The Flathead Reservation was to be dissolved as early as 1952, but tribal members opposed the policy out of a desire to keep our homeland. For the first time in nearly a century, Indians would take an active role in the management of our own resources. In 1954, the Indian Service became the Bureau of Indian Affairs, Forestry Division, reflecting a better awareness of tribal concerns. This new tribal awareness and the need for a new inventory led the tribe's forestry branch to rewrite the management plan. Approved by the Tribal Council in 1967, the plan included new marking procedures and ways to achieve a more accurate annual cut. It also mandated artificial reforestation, fire suppression, and insect and disease control. Tribal involvement in timber management continued to grow in the 1970s and 80s. Logging contracts began to require timber stand improvement, helping support the new forest development and tribal forestry programs. 1972, the Tribal Council directed thinning and reforestation contracts to independent tribal contractors only. In the late 70s, a wilderness program in primitive areas were created. 1980 brought the Tribal Wildland Recreation Department into existence. The Natural Resource Department added a wildlife biologist and a hydrologist. Successful intensive forest management requires a large forestry staff and adequate funding, and full tribal interest and support. Currently, we have 34 tribal forestry staff members, 25 BIA foresters, and over 100 in natural resources. Another new policy took effect, interdisciplinary planning, where many tribal departments took part, along with resource management, in planning timber sales. In forests, multiple use and uneven-aged management practices began. Some of our forests, as a result of Tribal Council action, are set aside or dedicated to uses other than timber production. Areas exempt from logging exist in the Mission Mountain Wilderness, Jocko Primitive Area, and Chief Cliff Reserve. The Lozo Primitive Area is currently under review regarding timber use. To date, timber production has been of secondary importance in the Ferry Basin Elk Management Area, the Mission Mountain Buffer Zone, and the Little Money Bighorn Sheep Management Area. Other acreage includes home site and grazing lands. Of about 456,000 forested acres, the exclusions total over 150,000 acres. The management of a healthy forest requires the use of tools and techniques already known. Most important is the reintroduction of fire through prescribed natural burns and set fires. Otherwise, a continued emphasis on fire suppression in timber management may lead to a disturbance that will greatly change forest ecosystems in ways rarely or never before experienced. Other tools include logging practices such as clear cut, seed tree, shelter wood, and selection cut regeneration harvests, green tree retention, and non-host species reforestation. New management concepts like ecosystem management, land use allocation, genetically improved nursery stock, All must be evaluated and used if feasible. The tribes, with BIA assistance, can continue to balance protection and use of the reservation's resources if we encourage ongoing education of present staff, tribal members, and leadership, and encourage commitment of our tribal youth in natural resource management. And new answers to old questions must be addressed. What are old-growth forests? What should be done in the South Fork of the Jaco and Lozo primitive areas? How can we protect our threatened and endangered species? What is to be the role of fire in the beautiful Mission Mountain wilderness? Where do we go from here? The new Forest Management Plan and associated environmental impact statement are now being rewritten, offering the tribes and their members an opportunity to get involved in the management process. We have an opportunity to revive our custom as wise stewards of the land. The people of the lands now known as the Flathead Indian Reservation must still take from the land the things we need to sustain life, but must remember that we, our needs, our technology, are only a part of the circle. Nature and change are integral too. The forests and fire, disease and insects, the rain and the drought, each claims its place. Working with nature, we can be an instrument for healthy change. If we don't, nature may be the catalyst for catastrophic change. The land, Mother Earth, is what provides the food for Indian people. The pure water and air of these lands must be protected, for they support the people and the fish and the wildlife, as well as aid in the growth of plants whose roots and berries we need. Our religious sites must also be protected, so they will remain sacred. Today, tribes struggle to uphold cultural values and to protect the environment.
Esposalsi kumi kulpenchumas puta est sluya kast ulich o kast kalichlen ulmen lu es ja skelig lu het kast sechult lu putits nes